Where do the Baltimore Ravens stand entering their bye week? We talk about that, continue recapping the Saints and Ravens Week 9 game, and more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens with a very special guest.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravenswire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning with us, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube. So be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and in audio form, be sure to follow along. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is covered this season with more props, odds, and lies than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts, and we are here, a midweek edition of the show, coming off of the Ravens 27-13 win over the Saints, and here to break that down with me, talk about just where the Ravens are heading into their bye week in Week 10 is Ken McKusick of Filmstudy. Ken, the Ravens 27-13. How pleased were you with the victory?
Yeah, outstanding formula for the win. Looked like 2019 again. They ran the ball right down the Saints' throat, even though they knew it was coming, which hurt the averages a little bit, but honestly was still a great game. They never trailed. They were able to pretty much do what they wanted offensively. Defensively, they looked completely reinvigorated. They won the snap count by a wide margin. So it had all the earmarks, all the pins of a 2019 win, just completely outclassing their opponent.
Yeah, and I talked about how I kind of wanted to see that like front to back end domination of the team. And there were a couple small blemishes here and there, but for the most part, you have to really like what you saw. And for Lamar Jackson, Ken, let's just start with him. He had that tear start to the year where he was, in the MVP conversation. Stats were there, but he hasn't really necessarily had those in this game. 12 of 22, 133 yards through the air, also contributed on the ground, but he contributed in a big way to this win. And John Harbaugh talked after the game, don't look too much into the passing stats. And you look at the numbers, the 22 pass attempts, the Ravens ran the ball 40 times. So this was a run heavy effort anyway. But what did you see out of him, and what did you like, and maybe what didn't you like?
He missed some throws. So that's definitely one of the things. He missed some throws on the move, which is not ideal. He also, saved some plays. Certainly saved some plays where he ran for positive yardage. He saved a play big time when he had the fumble that was a combination of a bad initial block by Moses and then a strip by Moses inadvertently, of course. That was a little weird, but he certainly saved some plays and he made some others. Distributed the football well. 10 different receivers caught a ball, 10 different had targets. That's really nice to get that many players involved in the offense. It's not something we've ever seen from Lamar before in a game. So that was good. I thought the Ravens controlled this game to such a degree that it's a kind of a typical Lamar Jackson win, that it's a one where statistics are not particularly impressive for anyone. And yet the overall result is very impressive, and that's really what happened here. The Ravens look good defensively. They look very, fresh because of what Lamar did, I think, on offense too.
Yeah, and you mentioned the connections to these different receivers. Ken, how much stock do you put in that for maybe later in the season coming out of the bye when Mark Andrews will come back? Obviously, Rashad Bateman isn't walking through the door again this year, but how important is it to establish those connections now if you're Lamar Jackson so you can use them later?
Important. Some of these guys will not be around, to be honest. James Prochet may not see the field much the rest of the year. Nick Boyle may not be back on the field much. So Oliver's connection with him may or may not mean as much when Charlie Kolar is back. I actually think Oliver's got a pretty secure spot right now in the rotation. But Charlie Kolar, I think, will be an interesting new chance. I think Isaiah Likely, caught the touchdown pass, but did some other things that didn't really earn him the points he could have had. He had a ball on the left sideline. It was a tough grab, but it's one he could have had. He dropped. He had a very bad drop on the right sideline that almost turned a sure reception into a turnover. So it's a mixed bag for Likely, but then he did have the touchdown catch, and that was a really nice plan on the play. It was a nice call, and it was a nice clear reception and separation there from Likely, which was positive. So hopefully they don't lose that connection after a 1-for-5 game.
Right, and you mentioned that touchdown where Lamar Jackson works to the side of the field. He doesn't really go downhill, and you're thinking, "Oh, he's going to throw this one, isn't he?" And he winds up, and it's an easy connection for the two. But Ken, you mentioned those 2019 wins, and it did feel like one. The Ravens over these past 2 weeks, they've dominated their opponents in time of possession. The Ravens have held the ball for 76 minutes and 10 seconds. Opponents just 43 minutes and 50 seconds. The two touchdown drives for Baltimore early, they were long drives over 7 minutes each. And part of that had to do with the dominance on the ground. No J.K. Dobbins, no Gus Edwards, but you have Kenyon Drake, 24 for 93 and 2 scores, and then Justice Hill working in as well. I mean, those two guys, I think even when J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards come back, I feel like they could be pieces in this offense.
Hill in particular is very important to the offense, and he brings something different that you don't get with either Edwards or Dobbins in terms of having outside speed. I was a little surprised he didn't get more of a opportunity to run the football in this game. They did give it mostly to Drake, and Drake, carried the load. He did not really break one for big yardage. I'm trying to think if he had a 17-yard run or something to the left side that I recall. Might not have been the exact yardage, but honestly, I expected to see more of Hill. I think we should feel lucky that we saw a fair amount of Hill and not very much of Davis in the game. But Davis in this game, boy, he had one chip block that is the poster chip block of all time in terms of knocking down the edge rusher there and then going out and actually catching the pass.
And he had a couple of, I think he's had a couple of those in his career. I think he's known for doing stuff like that. But that one, it was incredible. When I saw it live, I pointed it out, and then he caught the ball and ran for positive yardage. So it was the Mike Davis play there. But Ken, running the ball, what did you see personnel package wise from them? Did you like what Greg Roman put out there on the field and how they executed in those packages?
Well, if you like tight ends, you love it. I do. I enjoy seeing a team being able to run the football when everybody knows it's coming. It was pull after pull after pull of the game. We just got finished scoring the offensive line, so just noticing on the last drive in particular that they asked Powers to pull 6 times. Looks like he pulled 13 times in the game. So I mean, they were doing their standard kind of left to right pulling for most of the game. They did some zone as well. They did a little bit of everything. They did a lot of counter. So they used a lot of deception running the football. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. They did not get Lamar free up the middle much, and that's what I'd like to see Hill on the field more for. And that's what I think was missing from the run game in this game, was having him out of sidecar, really threatening the edge, allows Lamar to keep his eyes right down the middle of the field, and that is use his peripheral vision as best he can, allow him to see the field in that direction, and find where can I make my read to get free here, because he certainly has not had one of those opportunities that really went for a lot in the last couple of weeks. He's had some designed runs, don't get me wrong, that have gone for a few yards, and he ran for 70 some yards in this game, but it wasn't really the up the middle break one for a home run kind of shot against this team.
Right, and we've seen that play run so many times so effectively, especially, those NFC East teams have had. I know he did one against Philadelphia. I think Washington was another, and I think Dallas was against Dallas too. So it is a very common, well, I'm not going to say common, but against those NFC East teams, they know what's coming. But there was that one sequence where the clock kept going, 3, 2, 1, Lamar Jackson, obviously very frustrated, spikes the ball. Him and Ronnie Stanley have an animated conversation. What was that to you, and what did you see? Because this has been an issue with the clock where, with the play clock in particular, this is not just this game thing. This dates back years now.
Yeah, I think that was actually a 3-man problem. They were a little bit late to the line of scrimmage, which is how these problems always start in terms of not getting the clock. And they're always running that offense on the edge in terms of getting the line of scrimmage late. So that's problem number 0 of 1 to 3. Now, problem number 1 is that Jackson was a little late calling for the football, and you have Zeitler looking back for Andrews to call for Jackson to call for the ball. He then taps Linderbaum, and Linderbaum snaps it. Well, I'd say Jackson was late with the signal, and then Zeitler was late with the tap, and then Linderbaum did not deliver the ball immediately either. So I'd say it's a 3-way situation, and Zeitler kind of looked like he was falling on the sword for it. Stanley, Moses, Drake, all trying to get Jackson to calm down. That did not work in that situation, not at least until they got off the field. I think from the looks of it, he was kind of mad at Linderbaum throwing the football in that general direction. is not a good thing. Obviously, hopefully that got resolved with teammates before they even got on the plane. So it looked like it did on the sidelines.
Yeah, it seemed like everything was good, but he was definitely hot on the sideline, frustrated on the sideline for a little bit there. And look, I mean, understandably so. It's something where the offense is cooking in that situation. You have an opportunity to punch the ball in again, and then you have these self-inflicted mistakes, which we've seen throughout the entire season. So hopefully moving forward and obviously in the bye and everything, they can correct some of those things and come out of it as a better football team. But coming up in our second segment, we'll be diving into the defense a little bit, talking about Justin Houston, how good he's been, Roquan Smith, and more. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on the show. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about SimpliSafe. And the Ravens were super secure. Their defense was in that Week 9 win against the Saints. But if you ever thought about securing your home with home security, but if you've been putting it off, you'll want to listen up, because right now, Locked On Ravens listeners can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. And there are so many reasons why so many people love SimpliSafe. They have tons of different things, such as advanced technology. You can watch crystal clear HD live stream of your security cameras, and they have a wide variety of high-tech sensors. And in an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agencies, fast protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get priority police response. They have 24/7 professional monitoring, and their service costs less than $1 per day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. So don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that so many recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Ken McKusick of Filmstudy. And Kevin, when you talk about the defense, now there was the one blemish of the Juwan Johnson touchdown that I think put a phenomenal defensive performance, maybe just into a great defensive performance, but you can't take away from what they did. They held the Saints to 3 of 11 on third down. Offensively, Baltimore at 9 of 15, by the way. But I don't know how I can start and not talk about Justin Houston. He's been incredible this season, 8.5 sacks through 6 games. He has been resurgent this year. The sack numbers weren't really there for him in 2021 for Baltimore. I think just 4 last season, but he's looked great, and I think also picking up some of the production that maybe people anticipated from Odafe Owe. And Owe's been held on a lot of plays, but the sack production just not there for him. What'd you see from Houston on Monday night? Because he was dominant the entire way.
Highly synergistic performance. Every one of his big plays involved another player. So he had, let's see, the initial sack was off initial pressure by Queen. He cleaned it up for S-2. Then he had an S-8 that was off a pick from Queen that was unbelievable. Great play by Queen to take Andres Pete and Kamara out of the play. So that was a another one where he worked really well with another player. Then let me think. The third one, he came in. He appeared to have the sack, then appeared to slip off it, and then Campbell delivered the unbelievable hit, and they each got half of that sack as it turned out. I don't think he would have completed that sack on his own, though, if it had just been there. I think he would have slipped away. And then, of course, Urban tipped the ball up, and he collected. He was in the right place at the right time. So it was a good effort. It wasn't a bunch of dominant one-on-one pass rush wins. In fact, he didn't have any other pressures in the game other than those 3. He played 32 snaps, 24 of them were pass plays. So he had a fair amount of pass blocking opportunities. But it was a very synergistic effort. And all the Ravens did in this game defensively was a combination of multiple players helping each other to do things. All bunch of blitz schemes, bunch of stunting, bunch of things where the secondary basically is helping out the pass rush. Bunch of things where the pass rush is helping out the secondary by getting a pressure and forcing a throwaway, forcing a bad ball. So very, very great team defense in this game. And the results are excellent in terms of sacks and whatnot. In terms of individual one-on-one wins, less great.
Right, and I mentioned Odafe Owe in this game, 2 total tackles that have the tackle for loss. But again, I think a lot of people were expecting more out of him this year. Has had a bad whistle ref-wise with the amount of times he's been held. But where are you with him right now, Ken? And what do you want to see from him coming out of the bye week?
So this is a big week for Odafe because he got to move back primarily to the rush side. He still had some Sam snaps in this one, but primarily he was back on the rush side, and that's his home. That's where he's more familiar with his responsibilities, knows what he has to do. Doesn't have to drop to cover as often, although Ravens can drop from either side. I think he dropped a couple of times in this game. I know he was on one of the blitzes, like Humphrey's sack. I think he was a dropper. But basically speaking, does not have to drop that much anymore. So anyway, that's going to be better for him, I think. He also got a reduced snap load, which is, I think, will also help him stay fresh. They really need to just unleash him to do the things that Adafioe can do, whether that's jam a receiver and then still rush, or stunt 2 gaps, stunt 3 gaps, even in his case, because he's so quick to get to the middle of the field. And I think they have the personnel to try some of that now, and they don't have those responsibilities on the tight end that require him to be so involved in that. So hold 3 pressures, that great run stop. I thought he had a pretty good game, not a bad game certainly, but a pretty good game this week. Still not really getting rewarded with finishes.
Right. And again, for these guys, it doesn't all just come in the box score where if a guy has 2 tackles, he played a terrible game. I think he did look better in this one. And someone who I know a lot of people are happy to have back. Let's continue the outside linebacker trend. It is Tyus Bowser. Now, he ended up on, what was it, the 3rd defensive snap of the game? He was unblocked and looked like he got shot out of a cannon. What did you see from him in this one? Because I thought, at least from what we saw, he looked decent.
Yeah, a good solid game. That was a big play. Any drive-ending play, that's high leverage value. You want that, so that was great. Had a quarterback hit on what was actually a pretty big passing play. I think it might have gone for 19, but Dalton was not ready to take more hits at that point in the game, so that was a good one. He otherwise did fine in terms of playing the run, dropping the coverage a fair amount. So he was giving the Ravens value, but more importantly, I think he was making other players more valuable by his presence, because him back at Sam, like I said, improves Owe and his play, improves some of the other things they can do at that position. And the Ravens are frankly now at outside linebacker back in that good spot they were in when they've had, pretty much a team history. They've never had a rotation that's been quite as good as this. Last year was good. They had 3 guys who could really bring it in terms of the pass rush. This year, they're even deeper, with Jason Pierre-Paul there and Ajabo. They've got the same 3, and then they've got more. And I think this could well be one of the best units. We'll see down the stretch. They certainly play some teams that are not all that good. And this is a team chance for the Ravens to have some big leads, them to get a chance to hunt, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think that they'll probably be playing more packages the rest of the way, where we see 3+ outside linebackers on the field, since that's where a lot of their good pass rushers are.
Right, and the guys have the skill sets to do that too. They all have varying skill sets, and they all, I think, really, really mesh well in what Mike Macdonald has done with this defense this year. And I've been very impressed with him over the course of the last handful of games here. But again, the big news was obviously last week the Ravens going out and get Roquan Smith. He plays in this Monday night game, and instant impact. He had multiple run stuffs on Alvin Kamara on 2nd and short, 3rd and short. The play, though, in coverage where it was him and Kamara breaks out and catches the ball, and Smith stride for stride with him. We know this is a team that has sometimes struggled containing tight ends, containing running backs out of the backfield. How impressed were you with his performance in this one?
Yeah, outstanding performance by Smith. He didn't have the full-time playing going on. So he 37 out of 49 of the snaps that counted, the non-penalty snaps, 76%. So Queen was the guy who was getting all the snaps. So he was in there basically every play. He missed 2 snaps, but little surprising from that perspective. I thought, part of the idea of getting Roquan is you make Queen into a full-time will, but honestly, Queen also had a fantastic game and did a bunch of positive things. Didn't really show up as much in the stat sheet himself. They had, I think, 6 tackles, 5 tackles, but it was only one of them. I think it was a win by the Football Outsiders definition. So it wasn't a bunch of big splash plays, but it was the pick play that set up the sack. It was the initial pressure that set up the sack. It was that PD he got in coverage. It might have been a little early. It was basically probably a flash, an amount early that it couldn't be called. So that was good. I thought, Roquan, though, getting back to him, the only reason I can see why he didn't play all the snaps, because he always did in Chicago, is that he is not quite completely learned the playbook. They're doing a lot of things with him in terms of rushing the passer, where they're playing games with him and Queen at the line of scrimmage, dropping the line of scrimmage, etc. So I expect we'll see a lot more of him, and probably he will be the full-time snap guy. I know there's a lot of people in Baltimore who are already claiming he's going to get the green dot. That ain't happening. Not anytime this season. I think Chuck Clark keeps it, and we'll see next year if they want to move it. But my guess would probably still be no if Clark is here. But if it does, I think it'd be somebody else actually who would get it. So, which we probably want to talk about next, right?
Yeah, that we're going right into it. Let's talk about that one play, the Jawan Johnson touchdown, where, again, Marcus Peters has him on the sideline, kind of looks like he's working for the ball a little bit. Chuck Clark is right there, can kind of push him out, shove him out, and he'd be done. But instead points to the sideline, and obviously Johnson runs right by him. There is still controversy as to whether he was out of bounds or not. Obviously, the play was called a touchdown. But what'd you make of that whole situation again? It was just a bizarre one.
It was a weird situation. It looked to me like Peters was sure he was out of bounds, and it looked to me like he probably was out of bounds with his inside foot. And there was some question of whether the heel of his foot went down and it touched the line or whatever. It looked like it pretty clearly did to me. And all of the other replays they showed, except for one angle, you didn't see that inside foot sticking half down. So I haven't looked at the all 22 yet for that play in particular to see if you can tell from that. But my guess is Peters is probably right. He went to the sideline. Obviously, he still wanted to keep talking about it. Harbaugh was done. And they, he obviously sat down for the rest of the game after that. That play was one of only two missed tackles that I charted during the game. So there was one earlier from Broderick Washington earlier in the game, had an ankle tackle on a run play that the guy ran through. I think it was Kamara, but it might have been Washington. Anyway, there was one there, and that one, which I guess you could call two. It did appear like both Ravens defenders really were trying to avoid a penalty and avoid a big hit by not, drilling a guy out of bounds who deserves it if he keeps running. But the whistle didn't blow, and they ends up they just did a stupid thing.
Yeah, so hopefully that's something that's now in the past and we will not see it again. And if there's a guy on the sideline, they'll just, do a little tap out of bounds and he'll actually go out convincingly. But Ken, let's stick with the secondary and just what you've seen from them so far, especially in this game. Kyle Hamilton playing well right now, Marlon Humphrey and Peters himself, they've been really good this season. What's your confidence level after what you saw in this game against New Orleans?
High. And the reason is that there's two starting corners I never have any doubt about, but I'll always have injury risk, and the Ravens have no backup currently. What the big step forward they got in this game was having Hamilton play as well as he did and take over the nickel role effectively. And I'm going to do a lot of that on my podcast, probably have about a 20-minute segment talking about just that on the defensive pod tonight if folks want a real lowdown on that. But that's one of the biggest needs. I mean, they've got three guys they don't really trust, and with good reason right now, to play slot corner, and that's Pepe and Brandon Stevens and Jalen Armour-Davis, who hasn't even been active for, he was active for the first time since I think week 3 in this game. That's not a lot of confidence. There's not a lot of confidence in those guys, and have Hamilton step up really makes the team a lot deeper all of a sudden to have a nickel they can trust, keep Humphrey on the outside where he's most effective, and just generally be more effective defensively because he was very good.
Right. And so a more general question, Ken, is when Marcus Williams comes back, how does that change what the Ravens do secondary-wise?
Well, it doesn't have to change too much. Stone probably has to go back to the bench, even though he's playing great football right now. I mean, he's been outstanding. I can't imagine where the Ravens would be right now if Geno Stone hadn't stepped in at the kind of level he had these last few weeks. Clark will still be on there with the green dot. He didn't have a great game this game, but penalty and the missed tackle on the sideline, if you want to call it that, those were not good plays. But Clark in general has been very good, and this is a secondary that he's very much in control of, and a defense that he's good at organizing. Hamilton, I think, will continue to play slot corner for the rest of the year. I don't think we'll see him pretty much anywhere else because the Ravens need him there. And then I think that you still have the opportunity to pull Queen off in the dime, or maybe Roquan, depending on how they feel about it, in the dime package, and bring Stone back in then, which would move Stone to the back end, Williams to the back end. That's an unbelievable back end, by the way, folks. That's 2 free safeties on the back end. And then you move Clark up into the box, and you'd have still Hamilton at slot corner in those situations. I think that'd be extremely powerful. Can't lose either of the big two.
No, if that happens,
yeah.
What would you do? What would you do then if you're the Ravens if you lose?
You're stuck. You probably end up with Brandon Stevens on the outside, or you give it to Jalen Armour-Davis early. But I don't even know what you do because every time Stevens is on the field, Dalton was looking to take advantage of him, and he did. So it's you really can't have I don't think Stevens is ready yet to take over a full-time outside role. I think the Ravens would really suffer.
Yeah, and we saw Jalen Armour-Davis a little bit when Marcus Peters was still working his way back in, got picked on a little bit in that Dolphins game. So right now it's also hard to find outside help, especially now the trade deadline is gone and everybody's looking for corners. So it's hard to kind of figure out what to do there. And it's interesting when talking about it.
It's a great point because I always say that the replacement level drops as the season goes on. And certainly true in places like the defensive line, but it drops further at cornerback, I would say, than just about anywhere else. Maybe offensive tackle. The guy you get in December is a lot worse. But at cornerback, the guy you get, if you need an outside corner to play now, is terrible. I mean, he said you're going to the street, you're getting Willie Gaston. If you think back to 2007 and the Ravens, you're getting some really bad players.
Yeah, I mean, this is where like the Ravens last year were signing guys like Daryl Worley and just trying to figure out who was left because, if you need a corner, everyone else needs a corner. If you need an offensive lineman, everyone else needs an offensive lineman. Guys are getting banged up right now. So hopefully Baltimore can have the health or the injury gods be on their side moving forward. But coming up here, we'll talk about just where the Ravens are right now, their upcoming schedule, and just what expectations should be coming out of the bye. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have more to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about Blue Nile. And whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, or want to let your love sparkle, Blue Nile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's Ben Jewelers will then help you handcraft a perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. And you can shop stress-free with Blue Nile's 100% satisfaction guarantee. All Blue Nile orders are insured and shipped for free in discreet packaging. They also offer overnight shipping if you're in a rush. So make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com. Code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON. We're back here rounding out Locked On Ravens here on Wednesday with Ken McKusick of Filmstudy. I'm Kevin Oestreicher, your host still. And Ken, I have a question. If I had told you the Baltimore would be 6-3 entering their bye week before the year started, what would your reaction have been?
Taking it in a heartbeat. They had a tough early schedule. We kind of knew it with the Bills in particular and the Bengals early. And I'd still be looking at it and saying, don't know about these divisional games still coming up against the Browns and the Bengals, late. And the Browns, Bengals, and Steelers are not the imposing Titans that they were in past years.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I went through the Ravens schedule on yesterday's show and kind of went game by game. And I booked 2 losses for me. I have Cleveland and I have Cincinnati as the 2. Now, you also have games in there against non-divisional opponents, and they're not necessarily terribly hard. I mean, Carolina, you'd anticipate that to be a win. Jacksonville, probably a win. Denver, you'd hope. And then you have Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. What's your confidence level? The schedule's obviously easier down the stretch here. And with the way the Ravens have the momentum, are you feeling good about what they could do with this back half of the year?
Yeah, to make the playoffs, confidence is very high. To be the team they really want to be going into the playoffs, it's kind of a complex question because what they ought to be able to do in terms of basically playing games like they just did against New Orleans, leading the whole game never really in doubt, constantly just a score away from putting the game away for good kind of things that they kind of had in this game until they went up 27-6 and it was out of range for good. I expect that. I mean, I expect the defense to play well. I expect the offense to get leads. I expect the defense to play even better when they have the lead. And I think it's really good potential synergy. Ravens have a little bit of health yet to gain with Ajabo, Kolar, Marcus Williams coming back. So I think there's some positive things to look at then. Of course, an injury at cornerback would be devastating, as we mentioned in the last segment. And I think that's probably the biggest risk right now for the team. Other positions they're in better shape other than quarterback or left tackle to absorb an injury.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of controversy about wide receiver right now and just what they have there at the moment with Bateman being down for the season. But you mentioned it, Ken. It feels like they've kind of been getting pieces back for the entire season where like they get Peters back in week 2 and Dobbins back in week 3 and Stanley comes back in week 5 and guys go in and out. Obviously, it hasn't been completely a clean bill of health for them this season. But you mentioned it with Williams coming back, Andrews, Ajabo, and all these pieces. they're still getting reinforcements, and we're here week 10. That's really, I think, something that's an underrated part of it. But you mentioned that your confidence is high with the playoffs in terms of them making it. How high is your confidence with them winning the AFC North?
Oh, but it's as good as it's ever been. I think their chance of Bengals got a very tough schedule the rest of the way. I mean, that's just part of the reality of this. Is the Bengals are going to lose some games? They're already 0-3 in the division, so even if they won the head-to-head, the division is the next tiebreaker, and if the Ravens have a game lead with 1 to play, they'll be able to rest. So I think it's likely they will lose that game to Cincinnati in the last week, but I think they'll win the division. Very much like 2012, by the way. They had the division sealed up a week before the year was completed. So I think the likelihood is high that they'll win the division. I think that they over these next 4 weeks should hope to extend their lead. If they could get it to 2 games, that would be almost insurmountable. It's like 2.5, and they have a uniformly easy schedule the rest of the way until that Cincinnati game.
Yeah, and the way that the NFL has gone this year, Ken, has been interesting. There's been a lot of just weird football, I would say, upsets happening left and right. You have Philly, who's obviously still undefeated, but Buffalo might have a situation with Josh Allen at the time of this recording. Still pretty unclear what's going on there. Kansas City has looked mortal at times, although they're still very talented. But yeah, Baltimore here, the momentum is there. They have the 3-game win streak. They're out of that win-loss rut. So do you feel like this is a team that could challenge for maybe the top seed or a top 2 seed in the AFC?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the difference in the world between a 1 and a 2, but they are a team that could challenge for it. I think they could. They might get the 2 seed. They might be happy with the 3 seed with a week to go, kind of thing. There's multiple things that could happen. A little bit of it depends on who they would see in the playoffs too, in terms of how they would maybe view it. Obviously, the 2 is a better seed to earn than the 3 because you play that second game at home, which is really nice. That would be the seed that I would be really eager to get as a Ravens fan. And I think you just mentioned some of the other problems around the league, and they are significant in terms of the other teams. The Kansas City, they're good. They just have not looked unbelievably good in terms of DVOA and other metrics you would look at. The Ravens are ahead of them. In terms of what's happening to Buffalo, I think it's all on Josh Allen's elbow at this point.
Yeah, and I feel like with everything, there's only one bye now. You don't have the 1 and 2 seeds having the bye, but the second home game in the playoffs is so important. Baltimore has historically been good at home, and obviously the crowd there does great things at M&T Bank Stadium. And I think with the way the schedule works out for them, they could have a run here where they only lose a game, only lose 2 games they should win. That doesn't mean they're going to actually win all of them, but I do think they have that potential. But so let's just keep going up the ladder, Ken. Let's just go straight to Super Bowl. Do you feel like this team has the makings of a Super Bowl contender with everything they've gone through this season?
We've seen some kind of weird situations in the Super Bowl in the last 2 decades. Not out of the question. They're more talented than the 2012 team was by a fair amount. We'll see if they can translate that into something really meaningful. The 2000 team was far more talented than this team is. It's just defensively they were on a complete different level, and offensively they were good enough to get it done. But this is a team that is in between those two somewhere. And you can be in between those two somewhere and have a lottery ticket in the postseason. In this case, they may have a couple of home games if they're fortunate, and then sure, they're a chance. They might have to play somewhere they don't want to play, like Buffalo in late January. But there's worse things. There's worse places to be than Buffalo in late January if you're still playing football.
Yep, you're exactly correct there. And with everything going on with the Ravens, Ken, there have been some things definitely to improve. I mean, what are the big things coming out of the bye you want to see Baltimore get a little better at?
It's a good question. What do I really want to see them get better at? They're just coming off a game where they did everything so well,
right,
that it's really, really hard to pick something.
Maybe getting to the line.
Yeah. You could pick something like that. You kind of caught me off on my back foot on this question here. There probably are things. I want to see them stay healthy, obviously, and be able to use their outside linebackers the way they will optimize their play as opposed to out of necessity, which we saw in the first part of the year. So there's that. Other than that, they are very well set to win a lot of games against mediocre teams. And I don't really expect them to be challenged is the funny thing. Over these next 4 weeks, I mean, if they stumbled and went 2-2 somehow over the next 4 weeks, I mean, I have to completely rescind my opinion of this team or question, why did it happen kind of thing at the very least. They look too good for the coming opposition, which is always a dangerous thing to say.
Right. I mean, we've seen for the second half of the Tampa game, the entirety of the New Orleans game, we've seen a shift, which has been really nice. And if I'll get like nitpicky with it, I'll say like end of half defense. We've seen a couple times where Baltimore's end of half defense, they've given up it's a short drive, but they've given up a short drive. The opposing team gets a field goal. The opposing team scores a touchdown. So maybe just tightening up there, but not a ton to complain about after these last 1.5 weeks, whatever you want to classify that Tampa game as. But Ken, final question for you. What is the state of the Ravens right now, based off everything we've seen this season? The ups and the downs, going into the bye week and coming out of it. What do you expect the state of this team to be?
I mean, optimistic coming into the next game. They've got a bye week. They're going to go on vacation. They better be ready to get back to work when it comes down to it. A letdown against the Panthers would probably be the sort of thing that they'll be talking about in January, saying, "Oh, that could be the best thing that ever happened to us," kind of thing. No, it couldn't be. Don't let that happen. It's going to make your climb uphill a lot worse, and you're a lot less likely to get one of those top 2 seeds you want if you lose to them. So, I mean, I'm thoroughly optimistic right now, is all I can say.
Yeah, and I am as well. I think we've seen the flashes. After the early season, it's always early season stuff where you got to figure stuff out there, new pieces, new coaches, but now we're starting to see everything get put together, and that's really super exciting for me. So I'd say the state of the Ravens entering the bye week, it's very good. I think the vibes are very high right now, which is, the best thing you can do. Going into the bye week on a loss, and a disappointing one at that, would have been not as fun as where we are now, which is a 3-game win streak, 6-3, and obviously still first place, sole possession of the AFC North. That's all I have for you here today, Ken. Thank you so much, as always, for hopping on. Always great conversation. Please tell people where they can find your work and what you're working on.
All right. Outstanding. FilmStudyBaltimore.com is the website. Go there. Film Study is the podcast out there on all your podcast apps. Same as Locked On Ravens. Just look for that and you'll, I'm sure, find it. Otherwise, offensive line scoring will be out on the offensive pod, which comes out on Wednesday morning defensive pod this week, because a Monday night game is coming out on Wednesday morning, and a Thursday morning will be the offensive pod, and there'll be the offensive line scoring there for the game. But big game for the offensive line in this one, playing well in a game where they pretty much had their way with the opposition.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with the offensive line this season. It's been one of the bright spots on this team. And primetime games always gets the timing a little wacky, a little off, and now they're done with them. No more primetime games, well, unless there's a flex somewhere here or there along the line. But thank you again, Ken. Ken's work will be in the description below. Be sure to check it out. I highly recommend it. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back in tomorrow, it's back to more Ravens content, of course, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.